Okay, picture this. You're on a passenger plane, everything's normal, and then suddenly, a hijacker with a bomb takes control. Pretty terrifying, right? But that's not even the worst part. Now look out the window. You're completely surrounded by military fighter jets, and they're threatening to shoot you down. This isn't some movie script. This was the real-life start to an absolutely incredible story of two hijackings that pushed a flight crew to make a truly impossible choice.
I mean, seriously, how do you survive that? This was the nightmare reality for the passengers and crew of a Korean Airlines flight back in 1971. You're trapped. You've got a hijacker inside, the military outside. Your chances of survival feel like they're dropping to zero. So how on earth did they end up in a situation like this?
So let's just set the scene. You've got a hijacked commercial plane, and it's flying straight for the hostile border of North Korea. Inside, there's a desperate man holding the entire cabin hostage with homemade bombs. And outside, South Korean fighter jets are on the radio with a chilling ultimatum. Turn this plane around right now, or we will shoot you out of the sky.
But, a nightmare like this doesn't just happen out of the blue. To really get how it all came to this point, we actually have to rewind the clock and look at another hijacking that happened 2 years earlier, an event that completely changed the game.
All right, so let's go back to 1969. At this time, tensions between North and South Korea are just at a constant fever pitch. And in this incredibly tense environment, a North Korean agent hatches a plan to use a regular commercial airliner as a pawn for propaganda.
Now, you've got to remember how different flying was back then. It's kind of hard to imagine now, but airport security was practically non-existent. No metal detectors, no intense baggage checks. You could pretty much just walk onto a plane like you were getting on a bus, which, as you can guess, made a hijacker's job shockingly easy. So on December 11th, a Korean Airlines flight takes off for what should have been a totally routine trip. But mid-flight, a hijacker storms the cockpit with a pistol. Fighter jets scramble to intercept, but their pilot? He's faced with this terrible choice. The order comes down to fire on the civilian plane to stop it from crossing the border, but he just couldn't bring himself to do it. And so the plane flew on and just disappeared into North Korean airspace. After months of tense, nail-biting negotiations, North Korea finally returned some of the passengers, but not all of them. 12 people were kept.
And these weren't random people. North Korea was very deliberate about who they kept, the people they saw as valuable assets, the pilots, the flight attendants, and some passengers who had specialized skills. For their families back home, they were just gone, swallowed by the regime to the north. And this event, as you can imagine, sent absolute shockwaves through South Korea.
In the wake of this national trauma, South Korea basically vowed, this will never ever happen again. They launched this massive overhaul of their aviation security, putting in place measures that were, for the time, some of the most strict in the entire world.
They did 3 huge things. First, they brought in thorough screening for every passenger and every bag. Second, they installed these heavy-duty, armored, bulletproof doors to protect the cockpit. And third, and this is a big one, they put an armed sky marshal on every single domestic flight. They had basically turned their planes into fortresses in the sky. Or so they thought.
So now let's fast forward to 1971. A new hijacker who knows all about these new security measures comes up with a plan to get around them. He knew he couldn't sneak a gun past the screeners, and he sure as heck wasn't going to break down that armored door. So he thought, well, if I can't break it down, I'll just blow it up. The hijacker, a young guy named Kim Song-tae, gets on the flight carrying what looked like, maybe some food cans. But they weren't. They were powerful, homemade bombs he'd built himself, designed specifically to do 2 things: breach that new cockpit door and take out the sky marshal. And just minutes after takeoff, he puts his plan into motion. He jams one bomb onto the cockpit door handle and lights the fuse. Then he tosses a second, grenade-style bomb down the aisle right at the sky marshal. The explosions are just devastating. The door is breached, shrapnel flies everywhere, hitting the captain, and the sky marshal is knocked out cold. The blast even rips a hole in the side of the plane, and it just starts plummeting towards the ground.
The plane is in a total death spiral. The injured captain and his co-pilot somehow managed to pull it out of the dive just feet above the mountains. An incredible feat of flying. But their fight for survival, it had only just begun. The hijacker was now in the cockpit, and he was holding another live bomb.
So who was this guy? His name was Kim Song-tae, just 22 years old, living in poverty and just desperate for a way out. He'd been completely taken in by North Korean propaganda that made the 1969 hijacker sound like some kind of hero who got a massive reward. He also had this idea that his long-lost brother was a high-ranking official in the North, and he dreamed of finding him.
So the crew, thinking on their feet, they try this brilliant deception. The co-pilot tells the hijacker they're low on fuel and they have to land, pretending they've already made it to North Korea. They start approaching this deserted South Korean airstrip right near the border. And you know what? It almost works. But at the very last second, Kim spots a South Korean flag on the ground, and he realizes it's a trick. He completely loses it.
Just as Kim is forcing the plane back up into the air, the fighter jets appear. And this is right where our story began. The radio just crackles to life with that chilling message from the Air Force. Return now, or we will be forced to shoot you down. They are well and truly trapped.
The co-pilot, a man named Jung Myung-se, he knows they have seconds before they either cross that border and are lost forever or they're shot down by their own military. In this moment of pure desperation, he realizes there's only one thing left to do. He unbuckles his seatbelt and just lunges at the hijacker, tackling him right there in the cockpit.
As these two men are wrestling for control, the chaos in the cockpit actually inspires action back in the cabin. Passengers rush to help the now conscious Sky Marshal. Someone finds his pistol, which had been thrown across the plane during the blast. The Marshal grabs the gun, aims, and fires, shooting the hijacker.
You think the threat's over, right? The hijacker is down. But no. As Kim Song-tae falls to the ground, he makes one last vindictive move. With his final bit of strength, he pulls the pin on the bomb he was still holding. It clatters onto the floor of the cockpit, live and ticking. So now there's a live grenade rolling around on the floor of the cockpit. It's right next to the plane's controls. An explosion there would be catastrophic. It would destroy the instruments, send the plane into an uncontrollable dive. Everyone would die. And in that split second, co-pilot Jung Myung-se makes a choice. Without a single moment of hesitation, he throws himself right on top of the grenade, using his own body as a shield. The bomb detonates beneath him. He absorbs the full, devastating force of the blast, saving the cockpit, saving the plane, and saving every single person on board. 58 people survived that day. The only two fatalities were the hijacker and the hero who stopped him.
But the story doesn't quite end there. The plane was critically damaged. The captain was nearly blinded from his injuries. And yet, the mortally wounded co-pilot, Jung Myung-se, helped guide that crippled plane down for an emergency crash landing on a nearby beach. And in the most tragic irony you can imagine, this harrowing ordeal was his very first time landing a commercial airliner, and it would also be his last. He died shortly after, but not before he made sure every single one of his passengers was going to make it home safe.